When I first met Evan Blake, I wasn't looking for love. I had just moved to a new city for work, and he was the kind of man who made you feel safe just by being around. He had that quiet charm, always listening more than he talked, always making me laugh when I needed it most. Over the years, we built a life together that felt solid and peaceful. We planned our future carefully, and when he proposed, I thought everything was falling perfectly into place. We had been together for 5 years. I knew his habits, his moods, his favorite late-night snacks. I knew the way he held my hand when he was nervous and the way his voice softened when he said my name. I thought I knew everything about him, until she came back. Amber Scott. The name didn't mean much to me at first. Evan mentioned her casually one evening, saying she was a childhood friend who had just moved back to town. He looked happy when he said it, almost nostalgic. I didn't think much of it then. Everyone has people from their past. But as the days passed, her name started coming up more often. He would tell me about old memories, about how funny she used to be, or how she always knew how to make him laugh in school. Then the messages began. Late-night texts, just catching up. Lunch plans that I wasn't invited to. At first, I tried to stay calm. I didn't want to be that person who gets jealous easily. I trusted him. But little by little, something felt off. He became distant, distracted during dinner, lost in thought when we talked about the wedding. One night, I asked him directly if something was wrong. He smiled and said I was imagining things, that I was just stressed about the wedding. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that nothing had changed. But deep down, I felt it, a quiet fear that I was slowly being replaced. A few days later, we ran into Amber at a cafe. She was everything I wasn't, loud, confident, flirtatious. She hugged him too long, laughed too hard at his jokes, and looked at me like I was invisible. There was something about the way she talked to him, like she was reminding him of who he used to be before me. After that, Evan was never the same. He started staying late at work, ignoring my calls, avoiding conversations about the wedding. The man who once couldn't go a day without telling me he loved me now barely looked at me. I tried to talk to him, to fix whatever had broken, but he always brushed it off. And then, 2 weeks before our wedding, he told me he couldn't go through with it. He said he needed to figure out his feelings, and that Amber made him realize something about himself. I sat there frozen, staring at the man I was supposed to marry, realizing that the future we built had just fallen apart in one sentence. He walked out that night with his suitcase, leaving behind everything we had, the apartment, the memories, and me. And all I could think was how love can vanish so fast, how someone can promise you forever and still walk away for a ghost from their past. The first time I saw Amber again after hearing her name was at a mutual friend's engagement party. I remember walking in with Evan, feeling happy and calm. The place was filled with laughter, music, and the smell of food. Everything was perfect until I heard her voice behind me. She called Evan's name in that loud, playful tone that immediately got everyone's attention. Evan turned around, and his whole face lit up. He hugged her like she was some long-lost treasure, and for a moment, it felt like I wasn't even there. I stood there, smiling politely while they caught up. When she finally turned to me, she gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Lena, you're so lucky," she said sweetly. "Evan used to dream of dating girls like me back in school." Everyone laughed awkwardly, but I knew exactly what she was doing. It wasn't a joke. It was a message. I laughed too, pretending not to care, but inside something sank. I looked at Evan and saw it, that same teenage spark in his eyes. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was dangerous. I had seen that look before, the kind people get when they start remembering what they think they missed. After that night, Amber started showing up everywhere. She'd send him funny memes, remind him of old school moments, or text him about random things like, "Remember that song you used to love?" At first, Evan told me about it, saying it was harmless. But soon, the texts became private. He'd smile at his phone and quickly put it down when I walked into the room. One afternoon, I asked him if she was bothering him. He laughed and said I was being dramatic, that she was just a friend. But slowly, I started to feel like the outsider in my own relationship. When I'd ask him to spend time together, he'd say he was busy or tired. Yet somehow, he always had time for her. Amber had this way of making everything look innocent. She would compliment me in front of others, saying things like, "You're so patient with him, Lena." I could never be that calm. It sounded harmless, but I could feel the sting behind the words. She was planting little seeds, making me seem controlling and needy while she played the carefree, understanding friend. Whenever Evan and I argued about her, She somehow knew. The next day, she'd text him something comforting like, "I hope you're okay. You don't deserve stress before your wedding." It was like she was watching us fall apart and feeding off it quietly. I tried to tell myself it would pass, that Evan would see what she was doing. But the more I tried to hold on, the worse it got. Every small disagreement became proof that I was jealous. Every quiet moment between us felt heavier. I could feel him slipping away, not because of one big mistake, but because of 1,000 tiny moments she created, each one designed to make me look like the problem. By the time I realized what was happening, it was already too late. She didn't need to take him by force. She just had to make me look like I didn't understand him anymore. And slowly, piece by piece, she won. It was a quiet Sunday evening when everything finally fell apart. Evan asked me to sit with him in the living room. His tone was serious, almost distant. I thought maybe he wanted to talk about the wedding or something small that was bothering him. But the moment I looked into his eyes, I knew. Something inside me already understood that this wasn't just another conversation. He took a deep breath, rubbed his hands together, and said softly, "Lena, I need to be honest with you." My heart started racing, but I stayed calm. He continued, "Amber and we have a connection I never got to explore. I need to follow my heart." Those words echoed in my head, slow and heavy. I stared at him, waiting for him to laugh, to say he didn't mean it. But he didn't. He just sat there, looking guilty and confused, as if breaking my heart was some kind of brave decision. I asked him, "What about us? What about everything we've built?" He looked down and said, "You'll be okay, Lena. You're strong." That hurt more than anything. I didn't want to be strong. I just wanted him to remember what we had promised each other. But he was already gone, not physically yet, but emotionally miles away. The next morning, he packed his things. No long explanations, no goodbye hugs. Just silence and a few empty drawers. I stood by the doorway, watching the man I loved walk out of our apartment, out of our future, out of my life. After he left, the house felt too big. Every little thing reminded me of him. The coffee mug he always used, the jacket he left on the chair, the wedding invitations still waiting to be mailed. My dress was hanging in the closet, wrapped carefully in white untouched. I had imagined wearing it while walking toward the man who once said he couldn't live without me. Now it just felt like a reminder of everything that was never going to happen. A few days later, I opened social media, and there it was, Amber and Evan's engagement photos. My chest tightened as I looked closer. The ring she was wearing was almost identical to mine. The venue in the background was the same one we had booked. Even the date on the post matched the day that was supposed to be my wedding. It felt like someone had taken my life, copied it, and handed it to her. I didn't cry that day. Not even once. I thought I would, but I didn't. I just sat there quietly, staring at those pictures, feeling something colder than sadness, acceptance. It wasn't peace yet, but it was close. I realized there was no point begging someone to stay when their heart already belonged somewhere else. I didn't try to call him. I didn't try to confront her. I just let them be. Because deep down, I believed something. That people who destroy others for their own happiness never really get to keep it. Karma has its own timing, and I knew one day it would come for both of them. So I folded the wedding dress carefully, placed it back in its box, and told myself one thing. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of theirs, and I already knew how it would end. For a while, it seemed like Evan had everything he wanted. People in town would talk about how happy he looked with Amber. They went to expensive restaurants, took weekend trips to fancy resorts, and posted pictures smiling like they were living some perfect dream. Everyone said they looked like a movie couple. I stayed quiet, watching from a distance. I didn't hate them, I just waited. Amber moved in with him quickly. Within weeks, she quit her job, saying she wanted to focus on something bigger. Evan was proud of her. He told his friends she was starting her own boutique brand, something about handmade fashion items and accessories. It sounded impressive, but she didn't have a plan. She just had charm, and Evan had money. He started funding her dream, paying for designers, renting an office, and buying expensive materials. At first, everything seemed to be going fine. Amber told everyone her business was growing fast, and Evan backed her up. But people started to notice small cracks. The boutique never officially opened, and the few products she sold were cheap copies she ordered online. When her suppliers started asking for payments, she disappeared for a while, saying she was too stressed. Evan, trying to protect her, took out loans to cover her expenses. He said it was temporary, that she just needed time to figure things out. But it only got worse. Amber started spending more. New clothes, new bags, trips with her friends. Every week there was a new reason for spending, and every time, Evan found a way to justify it. Eventually, his co-workers began noticing the pressure on him. He looked tired, distracted, and always broke. He had to sell his car and even asked his boss for an advance. People tried to warn him, telling him Amber might be using him. But he refused to listen. He'd say, "She just needs time. She's been through a lot. She'll make it work." Amber, on the other hand, didn't seem bothered at all. While Evan was working extra hours to fix their finances, she was seen at bars, restaurants, and parties. Always smiling, always dressed up, spending his money like it would never run out. The same people who once admired their love story now whispered about how fast things were falling apart. By the 6th month, the truth was out. The boutique had failed completely, and Amber had already taken most of the money from their joint account. Evan was left with unpaid bills, debt, and a credit score that was slowly collapsing. He tried calling her, but she wouldn't answer for days. When she finally did, she said she needed space and went to stay with a friend. Though everyone knew she was living in a rented beach house, still using his cards. He came to work one day looking completely broken. The confident man I once knew was gone. The people he ignored when they tried to warn him now pitied him. He had lost everything trying to please someone who only cared about herself. And still, when someone asked if he regretted leaving me, he said softly, "Amber's just going through something. She'll come back when she's ready." He still believed in her, the same way I once believed in him. But now it wasn't love holding him there. It was pride and denial. And little by little, it was destroying him completely. After Evan left, I spent months feeling lost. My days were quiet, and the apartment felt too empty. But one morning, I woke up and realized I couldn't keep living like that. Crying over someone who chose to walk away wouldn't change anything. I decided to start over, not to prove anything to him, but for myself. I had always loved decorating spaces. It was something that made me feel calm and creative. So I took a small step. I rented a tiny studio space and started an interior design business. It wasn't much at first, just me, my laptop, and a few clients who trusted my vision. I spent long nights designing, sketching, and learning how to manage a business. Some days I doubted myself, but I kept going because giving up felt worse than failing. Slowly, things began to change. Word spread, and more clients started calling. I began to enjoy waking up early, dressing up, and going to work. My confidence came back piece by piece. I realized I didn't need a relationship to feel complete. I just needed purpose. For the first time in years, I felt proud of myself again. A year later, I received an email from a large company requesting a full office redesign. It was a big project, bigger than anything I had done before. I was nervous but excited. When I saw the company name, my hands froze. It was Evan's firm. I stared at the screen for a while, wondering if it was a mistake. But it wasn't. His company had been struggling financially and needed a fresh, modern image to attract investors. At first, I thought about saying no. Working for the man who broke me felt like opening an old wound. But then I reminded myself, this was business, and I was good at what I did. I replied professionally and accepted the project. A week later, I walked into the company's office for the first meeting. The building looked dull and lifeless, much like the people inside. And then there he was, Evan. He looked shocked to see me. His hair was thinner, his suit wrinkled, and his smile weak. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I smiled politely, extended my hand, and said, "It's been a while. Let's get started." He tried to make small talk, asking how I'd been, but I kept things strictly professional. Inside, I wasn't angry anymore, just calm. The power between us had completely shifted, and he could feel it too. I wasn't the heartbroken woman he left behind. I was someone who had rebuilt her life from nothing. Over the next few weeks, I worked on redesigning their entire office. Every decision I made, every color, every layout, reflected balance, clarity, and growth. Ironically, the same things I had found in myself. When the project was done, the company executives were thrilled. Evan thanked me, but his voice carried something else, regret. As I walked out of that building, I didn't feel revenge or satisfaction. I just felt free. Sometimes, life doesn't give you the closure you expect. Sometimes it gives you the chance to walk back into the same room as the person who hurt you. And this time, you're the one standing tall. When I walked into the meeting room, I could feel the air change. Evan was standing by the window, holding a file, but the moment he saw me, he froze. His face went pale, and for a second, he didn't know what to say. He looked completely different from the man I once loved, thinner, tired, and much older than his age. The confidence he used to carry was gone. All that was left was a quiet kind of regret written across his face. He finally spoke, his voice a little shaky. "Lena, I didn't expect." I smiled politely and interrupted. "I didn't either. But let's focus on the job, shall we?" He nodded quickly and motioned for me to sit down. There was a long silence before the meeting started. I could tell he wanted to say more, but I wasn't there for small talk or old emotions. I opened my notebook and started discussing the design plan, treating him just like any other client. Throughout the meeting, he kept stealing glances at me. Every time our eyes met, he looked away. I noticed the ring on his finger was gone. The last time I had seen him wear one, it was during his engagement with Amber. Rumor had it she left him after taking what little he had left, but I didn't ask. I didn't need to. The look on his face told me everything. His co-workers were polite, unaware of our history. They listened as I explained the design layout and budget. Evan barely spoke. He only nodded occasionally or asked small, unnecessary questions, maybe just to fill the silence. I stayed calm and confident. Inside, I wasn't nervous or angry. I was just detached. When the meeting ended, everyone left except him. He lingered behind, pretending to check his notes. Finally, he looked up and said, "You've done well for yourself." His tone was soft, almost apologetic. "Thank you," I replied simply. There was nothing else to say. He tried to smile, but it looked forced. Then he said, "You must think I'm a fool." I met his eyes and said calmly, "Evan, we all make choices. Some teach us more than others." He looked down, and for a long moment he didn't move. I could sense the weight of his guilt pressing down on him. I didn't hate him anymore. I had already made peace with the past. But standing there, watching him struggle to meet my eyes, I realized something powerful. I didn't need revenge. I already had closure. As I packed up my things, he said quietly, "You were always the better one, Lena. I just didn't see it then." I gave a small smile and replied, "You didn't have to. Life has a way of showing us what we refuse to see." Then I walked out, leaving him standing there in silence. That short encounter didn't end with tears or anger. It ended with calm, the kind that comes when you finally see the person who once broke you, and they no longer have that power over you. The shift between us wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, but it was everything. A few weeks after that meeting, I heard the news. Amber had finally done what everyone expected she would. It started with quiet rumors. People said she had been caught using Evan's name to take out loans and credit cards. At first, I didn't believe it. It sounded too messy even for her. But soon, the story spread everywhere, and it was impossible to ignore. One of Evan's old co-workers told me that he'd been getting calls from banks and legal offices nonstop. Apparently, Amber had been signing papers under his name for months, pretending to be his wife. She used his personal details to buy luxury items, travel tickets, and even apply for fake business funds. When the truth came out, she was already gone. She'd emptied what was left of his accounts and disappeared overseas, leaving him behind to deal with the damage. Evan's life completely fell apart after that. His company had already been struggling, but now the lawsuits started coming in. His credit was destroyed, his savings gone, and most of his friends disappeared when they realized how deep the mess was. He had no one left to help him, not even his family. They had warned him about Amber long ago, but he hadn't listened. Some people felt sorry for him. Others said he got what he deserved. I didn't say much. I just kept working and focusing on my own life. But deep down, I knew this was exactly how it was meant to be. Amber had never really hidden who she was. She was selfish, manipulative, and greedy, and she showed those sides from the beginning. Evan just refused to see it because he wanted to believe in his own version of her. A mutual friend once asked me what I thought about the whole thing. I told them calmly, she was always honest about who she was, he just didn't believe it. And it was true. Amber never lied about being dangerous. She just dressed it up as charm and passion. Evan thought he could handle her, that his love would somehow fix her. But people like Amber don't change. They just find new ways to take what they want until there's nothing left. I didn't enjoy seeing him broken. Despite everything, a part of me still remembered the good in him. But I also couldn't ignore the irony. He had thrown away something real for something shiny and temporary, and now he was left with nothing but the pieces of his own choices. In the end, Amber got away with almost everything. She vanished like smoke. No one knew exactly where she went. Some said Europe. Others said she changed her name and started over somewhere else. But I knew her type. She'd do the same thing to someone new, because that's all she knew how to do. And Evan? He was left to rebuild his life from scratch, just like I once had. Only this time, there was no one to help him up. Karma had done its work quietly, without my help. Watching it unfold didn't make me happy. It just reminded me that the truth always finds its way, even if it takes time. When the project finally ended, Evan called me. He asked to meet for closure. I agreed, though I wasn't sure why. I didn't feel angry anymore, and I didn't need him to apologize. But I was curious to hear what he would say after everything that had happened. We met at a quiet cafe, somewhere neutral. He arrived first, looking nervous, fidgeting with his coffee cup. I noticed the way he avoided eye contact, how he seemed smaller somehow, like the confident man I once knew had disappeared entirely. I sat down across from him, and we exchanged polite greetings, but there was tension underneath, the kind that comes from years of shared history and broken trust. Finally, he looked up and said quietly, "Lena, you were right about everything. I destroyed the best thing I ever had." His voice was low, regretful, almost broken. I could feel the weight of those words. He wasn't trying to manipulate me. He was admitting the truth he had refused to see for years. I took a slow breath and studied him for a moment. I didn't feel anger. I didn't want revenge. This wasn't about hurting him back. This was about justice. I looked him in the eyes and said, "You didn't lose me, Evan. You traded me for a lesson. I hope it was worth it." He looked stunned. I could see it hit him. The realization that he had thrown away something real, something steady and true, for someone who would never value him. I didn't soften my words. I didn't add explanations or apologies. I just let the truth stand. He tried to speak, to defend himself, but I shook my head gently. No, I don't need excuses. I needed the truth, and now I have it. That's enough. For a few moments, we just sat there. The cafe was busy, people walking past, laughing, living their lives. And yet, inside that small corner, everything from the past seemed to shrink into a single moment of clarity. I felt calm. I felt strong. I realized that I didn't need him to acknowledge my pain or beg for forgiveness. My life had moved forward, and I had grown beyond the person who waited for him to come back. Finally, he whispered, almost too softly for anyone else to hear. I was blind. I should have seen it before it was too late. I smiled slightly, not out of happiness for him, but out of recognition for myself. "Maybe you should have," I said, standing up. "But you can't change the past. We both live with the choices we've made." And with that, I left. I didn't look back. There was no dramatic exit, no shouting, no tears. Just the quiet understanding that life had given me the lesson I needed. That leaving someone who doesn't value you is not the end, but the beginning of something stronger. I walked away feeling lighter than I had in years. For the first time, I realized I didn't need closure from him. I had it from myself. And that was enough. Months after everything had settled, I heard that Amber was trying to come back. She had been reaching out to mutual friends, sending messages, and trying to reconnect with people who had known both of us. I didn't pay much attention. By that point, her words didn't carry any weight. She had already burned too many bridges, and Evan had long since stopped caring about what she wanted. Evan, for his part, ignored her completely. He didn't respond to her calls or messages. But it didn't matter anymore. By then, he had lost almost everything. His company had collapsed under the weight of bad investments and unpaid debts. His home had been sold to cover losses, and his reputation in the business community was ruined. People who once admired him now looked at him with pity or avoided him altogether. He had learned the hard way that choices have consequences, and some lessons are unavoidable. Meanwhile, my life had taken a completely different turn. My interior design studio had grown beyond what I could have imagined. I opened a second studio in another state, hired a small team of talented designers, and was finally doing work that made me proud every day. The business wasn't just successful, it was meaningful. Every client I worked with reminded me of how far I had come from the quiet, broken woman who had been left behind. The peace I felt wasn't about revenge. I didn't need to see Evan fail or Amber suffer to feel satisfied. Their mistakes and poor choices had naturally led them to where they were. Watching life balance itself quietly gave me a sense of calm I had never experienced before. It was almost poetic, The chaos they caused had passed, and now the results of their actions were plain for all to see. Sometimes I would think about Evan and what he had lost, but it no longer hurt. I didn't harbor anger or bitterness. I simply recognized that life had its way of sorting things out. My focus was entirely on my work, my growth, and my own happiness. I had learned that waiting for someone else to realize their mistakes doesn't make you whole. Building your own life does. Amber never regained any influence over my life. She remained a distant name in the background, a reminder of the past that I no longer needed to carry. And Evan, though once part of my story in a deep and painful way, was also just a chapter, a lesson that shaped the person I had become. By the time I reflected on everything, I realized I had everything I needed. Success, independence, and peace weren't about what others had done to me. They were about what I had done for myself. And that was far more powerful than any revenge or confrontation could ever be. Life had moved on, and so had I, stronger, wiser, and finally free. Now, when people ask me if I would ever take Evan back, I just smile. It's a question I used to struggle with, one that would have haunted me for years if I hadn't learned the hardest lesson of all. That love isn't about holding on at any cost. Sometimes love is proven not by how much you forgive, but by how strong you are to walk away when someone doesn't value you. I've thought a lot about the past, about the pain, the sleepless nights, and the betrayal. Evan left me for Amber, someone who only cared about herself. He destroyed what we had built together. And yet, in all that loss, I found something far more important than love or even revenge. I found myself. I learned that my worth wasn't tied to someone else's choices or failures. My value wasn't in being someone's second thought or backup plan. It was in standing tall, keeping my integrity, and refusing to let anyone diminish me. Amber took his money, his time, and part of his life. But I took something much bigger. I took my dignity. I refused to beg, plead, or stay in a situation that made me small. I refused to let anger or heartbreak dictate my future. Instead, I used it to build my career, my independence, and my peace. Every success, every milestone, every happy moment I've created since then has been proof that I didn't need anyone else to validate me. I learned that walking away can be one of the strongest acts of love you can give yourself. Sometimes I wonder if Evan truly understands what he lost. He had a chance to have someone loyal, someone who loved him deeply, and he let it go. Now he faces the consequences of his choices, and I have moved on. I don't carry bitterness anymore, but I carry pride. Pride in the life I've built, the woman I've become, and the strength I found inside myself when I thought I had nothing left. Looking back, the lessons were painful but necessary. Betrayal, heartbreak, and disappointment taught me that I don't need anyone to complete me. I am whole on my own. I can forgive, but I don't need to return to someone who walked away. I can love, but I won't settle for someone who doesn't value that love. So now, when people ask me if I would ever take Evan back, I simply say no. Not because I don't understand love, but because I understand myself. Amber took what she wanted and left chaos behind. Evan lost something far more valuable than money. He lost me, a person who chose herself, her dignity, and her future over a man who didn't deserve her. And that is something he will regret forever. Walking away wasn't easy, but it was the strongest choice I ever made. It was my way of claiming the life and peace I deserved, proving that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let go. And in that, I won far more than anyone could ever take from me.